Daf Aleph, 101 on the top. We learned that you can't be paida. You can't redeem certain things, and once it's put into a Eily, you can't be paida Menachos or Menachem. We asked, 1 second, an animal you can be paida when it's a balmum. Balmum in the Torah is called tamei. So something that's tamei, you should be able to be paida because it's like a balmum. So the Gemara said no. Even though a balmum you could be paida, but once it's in a Eily you can't be paida. So here that's tamei. Once it's in a Eily you can't be paida. So the Gemara asks now, right on the top, balmum heiche ikri tamei. Where do we find in the Torah that a balmum is tamei? It's called tamei. The Tanya was taught in a Bais, quoting the pasuk in Bechukaisai. Imkol behemet me'er shel yekriv mena korban l'Hashem. Pasuk over there says that talking about erechin. It says the kohen will stand. You'll stand the animal in front of the kohen, and the kohen will evaluate it. And the Bais says balimumim sheniften akasim medaber. We're talking about, it says behema tmeya, but it's actually talking about balimumim that were redeemed. A blemish that was, it could have been brought as a sacrifice, but it had this blemish, and so we exchanged it. Ata aimer balimumim sheyiftu. You say that the pasuk is referring to balimum, and if you look at the pasuk, it doesn't say a balmum. It says a behemoth tmeya. Behemoth tmeya means that it's not kosher.
Who's saying this? The Bais?
This is the Bais.
Ah, it's continuing.
So Keshuaimer, so the Bais continues and says 101. It says that further on there's a verse that says V'me behema tmeya upada berkacha hare behema tmeya amura.
Thank you.
You can push the camera. Push it out. Push it out. You can move it. Make yourself comfortable. There's a pasuk further on, like 10 pasukim later. It says V'im behema tmeya. If the animal was behema tmeya, was not a kosher animal, for example, it's a horse or a donkey or a camel, upada berkacha, and you redeem it for its value. Hare behema tmeya amura. So we have a behema tmeya. Hamani makayim v'imkol behema tmeya. So what do we do with the first pasuk? It says behema tmeya v'balimumim sheyiftu akasim medaber. It's talking about balimumim, animal with a blemish that gets redeemed. Whatever the case is, our point in this Gemara is to bring a verse that says that a animal that's a balmum is called tamei. So once we see that, the animal that a balmum is called tamei, then that would take us back to our Gemara before, that we could have thought that because a balmum is called tamei, and a balmum you can redeem, so maybe something that's tamei you can also redeem, even though it was already put into a vessel. It tells me that no, once it's in a vessel, you don't redeem it. But we see that there's this strong association between tamei and balmum. Yachal yiftu almum ma'iver, the Bais continues that maybe you could redeem an animal even though it has a temporary blemish, a blemish that would heal. Talmud leimar asher lo yakrivu mimenu korban l'Hashem. Pasuk says, the first pasuk, im kol behema tmeya. When we said it's talking about a balmum, this is the pasuk continues. It says that it's a behema tmeya that you will not bring from it a sacrifice to God. Misheina kreva l'Hashem kolikar. We're talking about something that's never brought as a sacrifice. Yatzazu sheina kreva hayam kreva l'machar. However, if it had a mumaiver is a temporary blemish, a blemish that heals, then that could be brought as a sacrifice for God. and such an animal is not considered that it has a real mum. Okay. Let's go back and just discuss one point before we go further. We had a statement before. Shmuel said that a carbon mincha, or the minchas nesachim, before it's put into a vessel, it could be redeemed. It could be exchanged for other ones. Even though it's been designated, but it wasn't put into the holy vessel, it could be redeemed. So that's the Mishnah. Shmuel added to that, and Shmuel said that even if it's still pure, you could still redeem it. So we learned yesterday. Even if it's pure, you could redeem it. So the Gemara asks, 1 second, but it says in the Mishnah shenitmu, that it became impure. That's when you redeem it, right? So the Gemara says no. It says shenitmu for what it says in the Seifa. In the end of the Mishnah, it needs the word shenitmu. So to make it symmetrical, it adds the word shenitmu in the ratio. But really, you could really redeem it even if it's still pure. Why? Because it was never put into a vessel yet. That was a statement of Shmuel. Basically, that you can redeem pure things that were designated for the temple. Normally, when you redeem something, it has some problem with it. It got a blemish, so you redeem it. You say, okay, this one we'll take out of the temple service, and we'll put in something else instead, because it has a blemish. Or maybe if it got impure, we'll say, okay, we'll take this out, we'll put in something else. But if it's totally pure, there's nothing wrong with it. Just to take it out is surprising. But Shmuel says yes. Why? Because it was never put into a vessel. Now the Gemara asks, Ma'isiv Rav Huna bar Menachos. Rav Huna bar Menachos asks the question. Ha'oifas. If you have birds, va'etzim or wood, v'halavina or frankincense, u'klei sharis, you have a holy vessel. All of these things, shenitmu, if they became impure, ein lehem pidyon. These things cannot be redeemed. Shlei nemar pidyon ela bebehema. Because redemption is only for animals. Okay, so far we don't have any problem yet. The Gemara explains. From this brisa, bishlei ma'oifas, it makes sense, birds, why can birds not be redeemed? Kedushas haguf ninu. Because those are sacrifices. Kedushas haguf means these things are actually themselves brought on the altar. V'lei nemar ela bebehema. Because only animals could be redeemed, and birds cannot be redeemed. But what about the wood, the frankincense, and the vessel? Why can't you just redeem it? What's the problem with redeeming the frankincense and the wood? Elalav, it must be mishum detayrim ba'alma, ein niftim. It must be because things that are pure cannot be redeemed. Here's that question on Shmuel.
Maybe you explained before I walked in, but why would a person, what's the purpose of redeeming this stuff? What's he going to do with it?
He could use it for his own things if he redeems it.
Just tamei?
If it's tamei, you can still use it.
It cause all kinds of problems.
Yeah, but for personal use,
generally, a person doesn't have a lot of use for something that's tamei. If it's tamei,
He's
it causes all kinds of
on
problems.
He eats it, no problem.
If he's an amaris, then he's not redeeming it.
Why not?
No, there are certain things that once they're tummy, then there's no use for. Like, for example, truma. The truma that becomes tummy, you can't do anything with. But other things that are tummy, you can still eat.
You're trying to make sure nobody gets your...
No, but I mean, you're not gonna bring something into your house that's tummy. It's gonna cause all kinds of problems.
We're discussing redemption. If you can redeem something that's pure, Shmuel said that you can redeem something that's still pure. We just quoted a brisa that says that you can't redeem birds, wood, frankincense, or vessels. So we said the birds we understand why you can't redeem, because you can only redeem animals. But the wood and the frankincense, why can't you redeem it? So we said maybe because it's pure.
Redeem it for.
Redeem it. It was given to the temple, and now you want to replace it with something better, or you want to use this one, and you're gonna exchange it
Exchange. After you give it.
after you give it.
But it's not Tamura.
It's not Tamura. There should be no prohibition, and it's just like, look, someone says I'm going to give my earrings to the temple, and then they go to the temple and they give the value of the earrings. So, it was an exchange for the. So here, someone donated wood, and then why can't they just exchange it? So it must be,
right?
Yeah.
Instead of the baby, right? You get the money.
something like that. Except that's a little confusing, but it must be because things that are pure cannot be redeemed. It needs to have some blemish in it. Otherwise, it needs to go directly. So this would be a question on Shmuel. Some sort of blemish would mean that it's impure, and that's why you're not giving it straight. Bahani nami, and these also afal gav denitmu kitahirim dami. And we're going to say that what's he doing here? These things, even though they became tamei, we're always going to consider them tahar. This is very interesting. So we said that these things can never be redeemed. Why are they not redeemed? Because we're going to consider them pure even when they're impure. Why should we do that? If they became impure, if someone contaminated touches them, why should we consider them pure? So it goes like this. Because the truth is that wood, a plain slab of wood that's going in the fireplace, or that's going to go on the altar, is not food, and it's not a vessel. So in the laws of Tumah, it doesn't really contract. It's not susceptible to Tumah. So why would it become Tameh if it's not susceptible to Tumah? There's a concept of things that are what it's called, specially beloved. Chibas HaKodesh. It's because of its specialty, we're going to consider it at the status of food, and food could become tamei. So even though wood and frankincense is not edible, and wood is not edible, and neither of them are vessels, but we're going to consider it like food, that we're going to allow it to become tamei midirabanan. So we're going to say over here that yes, it becomes tamei midirabanan, but we're going to consider it pure so that you can't redeem it, because biblically it's pure. It's only that we're going to consider it, even if it does become tamei because of this concept of chibas hakodesh, but we're always going to consider it pure. And the eitzim kamad le'meshayfelu l'gzirin le'meskashri, because wood, if you don't sand it down, it wouldn't be fit to be used on the altar. So what do you have to do? You have to sand it down to make it fit to be used. It has to be appropriate to be used on the altar. And the levaina doesn't become holy until you put it into the vessel. So we're talking about, are we putting it into the vessel? Because that's going to affect what we learned before. Yes, it must be that you put it into the vessel, right? And that's why you can't redeem it. And klisharis nami hayol veslu tara b'mikvah loy, and also the vessel that we said can't be redeemed. Why don't you redeem it? You can't redeem it because it's not really considered impure. But a vessel could become impure. It says yeah, but a vessel that becomes impure, you put it in the mikvah. So you'd have no excuse for redeeming it. Why? Because if you wanted to stay holy, you could just put it in the mikvah. So what we're talking about here is that we have several things that can never be redeemed. Why can't they be redeemed? Because they're pure. And this contradicts the statement of Shmuel that says you could redeem pure things. Now the fact is that these things aren't really pure, but we're going to consider them pure because they're not really food. And even if they're impure, we're going to consider it pure because you can just put it in the mikveh and it will become pure. So we're giving it a status of purity, and that's why you can't redeem it. The Gemara says, "Loi, Li'olamei malach, really I could tell you that Tahirim Balma Niftin. That Shmuel was correct. Things that are pure you could still redeem. So now go explain these three things, the wood, the frankincense, and the vessels that can't be redeemed. The reason why these don't get redeemed is because these are in high demand. Wood, frankincense, and the Gemara says, Bishlam levaino klisharis leishchichi. We can understand why frankincense and a vessel, it's not common because it was hard to get a vessel and they didn't have Amazon to buy frankincense. Follow? Yeah? So I guess it was hard to come by. They had to get it from the sap of the tree. Ela eitzim mishkach shchichi. Wood. What's the problem with wood? You cut a tree down, you have wood. Is there not a lot of trees in Israel? You have to get the trees from Lebanon. With wood, it's apparently you could get wood. So the Gemara says no. Eitzim nami kiven damar kalich nimsa beitilas pasal gam izbeach elchach leishchichi. Yes, you can get wood, but you can't get wood that's appropriate for the altar. So, because any wood that has a worm in it is invalid. We had the discussion before: is the wood still wet? But whatever the case is, it wasn't easy to come by wood. So therefore, we didn't allow you to redeem these things because once they're in temple hands, the temple needs them. You can't just redeem them and take them back and replace it with some other thing. So what we're saying here is that the truth is that you can redeem things that even if they're not pure yet, even if they're not impure, even if they're pure, you could redeem them. So how do we have these exceptions here, things that you can't redeem? Because these are things that are in high demand, and that once they're in temple hands, you don't take them out.
Who would even be able to locate something to take it out? Everybody's bringing, giving. I mean, how do you?
It could be he's on the way to the temple. He didn't even give it. You know, he designates some things for the temple. You know, people do this. They say, I can't find my wallet. I have all my important things in there. I have this. You know what? I'm going to donate this flower to the temple. If I find my wallet, I found my wallet. Okay, I have to give this to. Hey, I'm going to give this to. I'm going to schlep this. I'm not going for another 6 months. Okay, I'm going to use this. I'm going to give an exchange for it. You follow? That's how people. That's how. Okay, I had a friend talking about selling the birthright by Esav. So he learned the parsha, and he was the firstborn. So he told me he sold his birthright to his brother like many times. He sold it, People, so, if you let me play with your toy, I'll give you my birthright. People make pledges to the temple also. They do, I'll give $1 million. Then they run
so
to
you need a good account.
Then they run to the rabbi. Does it really count?
Always.
Sometimes the wives make pledges, and they run to the. I pledged. I couldn't find. The husband says you don't have any money anyway. If the Mashiach comes to the door, the wife is allowed to give money from the house, even though the money belongs to the husband, because the husband allows for small amounts to be given, but she can't give large amounts. Doesn't it? She can give the $5-10, whatever is hanging around. That the husband allows for it to be spent on it. Okay, that's not a modern discussion. It doesn't. Okay, Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Ishmi alei Shmuel. If Shmuel would have heard, Shmuel says again that you can't redeem anything that's. Shmuel says that you're allowed to redeem things that are pure. If Shmuel would have heard Hadatanya, this that it says in a brisa, that Hamatvis Tmimin Lebedek Abayas, that if someone don't you see there's two types of donations to the temple. One could be a sacrifice donation, and one could be it's called Bedek Abayas, to the upkeep of the temple. Let's say animals normally are given as sacrifices, not to the temple upkeep. But it could be animals have value. It could be that someone intended to give it to the to the temple upkeep. So let's say someone takes an animal that's acceptable as a sacrifice. Why? Because it has no blemish, and he gives it to the temple upkeep. So ein paidin, I say that it goes automatically from the temple fund to the upkeep of the temple. It goes automatically to the status of being offered as a sacrifice. It moves up in its donation level. That it's not, and you can't redeem it. Ein paidin eishelam mizbeach. You only remove it as a sacrifice. It needs to be brought as a sacrifice. Shekol haroilim mizbeach, because anything that's fit to be brought on the altar, any yetzer midei mizbeach lo'ilam, can never be taken out of that. And did we read this? Vafagav? No, that's taken out. You don't have it, right?
I have it.
Okay. What do they? How do they deal with these things in the?
He has the shita mekubetzes and.
So, did they put did they put it in the English translated? Yeah. Okay. What it says here is that even though it's given only as its value is given, but because it's pure, it doesn't get redeemed. Okay, whatever. Was the point.
So what's the proof? If you use it or you don't use it, what's the question on Shmuel?
What we're saying here is that if Shmuel would see that you can't redeem any, if Shmuel would have known this Mishnah, this Brisa, that you can't redeem anything that's pure, he never would have said what he said, that you can redeem things that are pure. Here, apparently, it says that something that's pure can never be redeemed, even though it was only given to the temple fund. It wasn't even given as a sacrifice. You still can't redeem it. It was just given to the Bedek Abayas.
But doesn't animals have a special limit?
So he continues and he says, Havi Hadabay.
Shmuel would have returned.
Shmuel would have returned. So the Gemara then says, V'loihi. But it's really not so. Who was the one that was saying this? Or Papa was saying this. Papa was many generations later. Several generations later, that it's really not so, because Shmuel Eily Hadabay, he actually knew this brisa, but he still didn't change his mind. He didn't retract. Lav Amrit Tasav does not say, Kivan de Leishchichi, since animals without a mum are not so common. So Loi Mifrak. Actually, over there we're quoting the answer that we said before, that since frankincense and wood are not so common, it can't be redeemed. So Hachanami here also. Kivan the shchichi mumin, because it's very common for animals to have a blemish. The pasli bebehema, the afila bedukin shabaya nami pasli, because even a small slit in the eyelid would also invalidate hilkach leishchichi. So therefore, animals that are without a blemish is not so common. So you have to imagine that there's bushes that have thorns. And the animals, they eat leaves and grass. It would be very common that they push their head into the bush to get the leaves. They're going to get a scratch on the eye. It's going to make a little cut. It happens all the time. To the gardeners, they put their hand in to pull out a weed. They're going to get a scratch. When the animals get a scratch, a cut on the eye. It's going to be a blemish. So therefore, we have a special rule here that you don't redeem the animals, even if they're given as a value donation to the temple upkeep. Why don't you redeem it? Because it's not common to have the
same like
we said before. It's a high demand.
What happened to the fact that the behemoth has a special pasuk?
Yeah, it could be that it's all based. It could be that it's all based on this. That because it's hard to get, that's why the animal goes into that status. Oh, do they have something there? They're saying more?
No.
Give me a second. I'll tell you if there's more to it.
The behemoth has a special pasuk.
Is it a pasuk or it just goes up to that level?
We just said Moshe Ramona Ramona Haifa with Shiva shall in them pigeon shall or pigeon ela behemoth. Okay, keep on going.
Okay. Let's see. Rav Kahana Amar. Rav Kahana says, Tmeim niftin, tahirin ein niftin. He argues on Shmuel. You can't redeem it if it's pure, only if it's tamei. V'chein amar Rabbi Shia. We also have a statement of Rabbi Shia that Tmei and Niftin, Tahir and Niftin. Also, he argues on Shmuel. According to one version, there's 6 different Rav Kahanas, so it'd be hard to tell you which Rav Kahana it is. But it could be a very early Amira. In Rabbi Shia is for sure early. It's at the end of the Tanaim. Ikeda Amri, there are those that say differently. There are those that say, Amar Rabbi Shia afilu tayrim niftin, that actually Rabbi Shia agrees with Shmuel that you can even redeem things that are pure. Rabbi Elazar says, Kulan tmeim niftin, tayrim niftin. Really, everything that's tummy could be redeemed, and everything that's tar cannot be redeemed. But there is an exception. There's an exception. That where there is one type of thing, that's one type of sacrifice of that, even though it's pure, it could still be redeemed. What is that? It's called the carbon oil of Yerid. That if someone is wealthy, he gives a certain type. If he's poor, he gives a certain type, and it's on a scale. That if he's very poor, he gives flour. Otherwise, he gives birds, if he's so-so. And if he's wealthy, he gives an animal. So there's verses, based on these verses, Mechatase, Al-Chatase. From these verses, we understand that if he designates one, but before he brings it, he changes his status, he's allowed to redeem it and bring for his new financial status. So he brings for that. So this is the one exception where you could redeem something that's pure based on these verses. Otherwise, according to Rabbi Elazar, you can't redeem something that's pure. Okay. We're not actually done with this entirely, because it's going to come back at us, this concept, especially Rabbi Shia's opinion, about redeeming things that are pure and impure. But we go on to a new topic now. Rabbi Shia. Rabbi Shia says, Shamati, I've heard, Pigel b'mincha l'Reb Shimon, Eina matami t'masaychlin. Okay. We mentioned earlier that food could become tamei if it comes in contact with something that's impure. It could become impure. But the only thing is, food needs to be something edible. Let's say it's edible, but it's prohibited. So physically edible, but halachically inedible. Why? Because it's not kosher, or it has some prohibition on it. You're not allowed to eat it. So Bais says, I heard that pigel means that if the kohen had thoughts when he was offering the sacrifice, he's doing the scoop, he has thoughts that he's going to eat the remnants of this karban mincha after the allotted time, the appropriate time for the sacrifice, which is 1 day. The mincha becomes invalid, and if someone eats it, there's a severe punishment, kares. So Reb Shimon says that it's not considered food. He heard, and therefore it won't become tamei. This food can't become tamei because it's not edible halachically. It's not halachically edible. The Tanan, ha'arla. Arla is fruits from the first 3 years of a tree. These fruits are not only forbidden to eat, but they're forbidden to have benefit from. Klaya kerem, is a mixture of grain in a vineyard, that's growing in a vineyard. Also, not only is it prohibited to eat, but it's also forbidden to have benefit from. Shora Niskal is an animal that killed a man. That what they do with it is they stone the animal. Now, what we're saying here is we're listing a whole bunch of prohibited foods, and we're saying that they're not considered, they can't become tamei. The problem here, Shar Niskal, is it's not shechted, so it has another problem. It's nothing to do with the Shar Niskal. It gets killed by. So what we're saying here is that if, after it was brought to court, and they gave the verdict that it needs to be stoned, someone ran along and just shechted it quickly to salvage. They shechted it before it was stoned. That way, we can at least eat the meat. So, but the truth is, it's still prohibited to eat. It's forbidden to have benefit from, even though we shechted it. And what we're saying here is because it's a shara niskal, even though it was shechted, it's not considered food because of the prohibition. Egla rufa is if a person dies in the field and on his way out of the city, so they have to bring this calf down and they chop the neck. So here also, we're going to have to say that after they brought it down to the area, someone came along and shechted it before they broke the neck from the back. Tzipari Mitzayra, the birds of a Mitzayra that were slaughtered. Upeter Chamar, or the firstborn of a donkey that was slaughtered. It's not kosher, but maybe he wants to feed it to a non-Jew. It should be considered food. And basar b'chalav, and milk and meat that's cooked together. These are things that are prohibited. Kulam metamen to masaychlin. All of them become impure. This is not Reb Shimon's opinion. This is the Tanakama's opinion. Reb Shimon kulam ein metamen to masaychlin. Reb Shimon holds that the prohibition on it is so strong that it makes it like it's not food. However, Reb Shimon Reb Shimon does agree that milk and meat together, that's mixed together and cooked together, still becomes tamei, even though you can't give it to anyone. You can't have benefit from milk and meat together. You can't even feed it to an animal because that's considered benefit. But he says that this still is considered food, because at one point